free agency has officially begun, and the San Francisco Giants have a lot of notable free agents. Their entire starting rotation outside of Logan Webb, Kevin Gausman being the headliner there, and then also there's DeSclafani, there's Alex Wood, there's potentially Brandon Belt. I mean, not even potentially. He is a free agent, even though the Giants put the qualifying offer on him. So coming up today, we're going to take a look at some sources that have predicted the free agent contracts for the top 50 free agents according to each source, who those top 50 are. So we're going to take a look at San Francisco Giants free agents and the expected contracts by these sources: MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and FanGraphs. So all of that coming up next. It's going to be a lot of fun on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, now including YouTube as well. And coming up on today's show, as I said, we're going to be looking at Giants free agents and relying on some independent sources, sources that aren't biased Giants fans like myself, talking about what the expected contracts will be for notable Giants free agents. Now, in the open there, I knew I was forgetting someone, and I looked, and it's Kris Bryant. Kris Bryant, also a big free agent, obviously finished out the year with the San Francisco Giants. So as this week goes on Thursday and Friday, we'll cover any news that comes up during that period for the Giants, but also I want to continue to just look through these lists and talk about guys I think are fits for the Giants and what those expected contracts are. So without further delay, let's just jump right into who these sources have as the top available Giants free agent. And I'm going to start with MLB Trade Rumors. Each source basically has their top 50 and they rank them and they give a projected contract. And we'll go in terms of the order that we do this. We'll look at MLB Trade Rumors, but different sources have different guys ranked in different places. And it's actually really interesting because there's a huge variance. And you'll see what I'm talking about right now. So for MLB Trade Rumors, they come in as like the middle ground among these three sources on Kris Bryant. And their projected contract for him is 6 years, $160 million. Now, the average annual value for that comes out to, $26.7 million per year over 6 seasons. And just moving on to the next source, let's talk about ESPN. And ESPN for Kris Bryant comes in at the low end. They're at 5 years, $90 million. Now, I put this out on Twitter the other day, and it generated a lot of kind of pushback when I talked about that contract. And what I said actually at the time was that I think ESPN is onto something with this. And as we go through this, we'll see there's a lot of variance for a number of different guys. And the person who's doing these for ESPN is Kiley McDaniel, who is a former head scout for FanGraphs. That's the wrong way to put it. He was the lead prospect analyst for FanGraphs. And then he went on to work for the Atlanta Braves. And now he's at ESPN up there with Jeff Passan as one of their leading he's an ESPN MLB insider. So Kiley McDaniel is no fool. And the fact that he has Kris Bryant at 5 years, $90 million is pretty shocking in a lot of ways because Kris Bryant is a big name and that is a low contract compared to what people generally think he'll get. But I think he kind of sort of nails it in terms of the actual expected production for Kris Bryant. Now, personally, I think he'll do better than that, but I don't foresee him getting what this next expectation is, and that comes from FanGraphs, who has Kris Bryant at 8 years, $200 million. That's an average of $25 million per year over the 8 seasons. So just a huge variance here. 8 years, $200 million, 6 years, $160 million, and 5 years, $90 million. In a lot of ways, I'm happy to see the variance. It makes this more interesting because it's pretty wild how these are 3 really solid sources, FanGraphs, MLB Trade Rumors, and ESPN, and to see that there's such a difference among them in terms of what they expect from Bryant is fascinating, and it speaks to the differences of opinion that exist in the fan base. Like, there's a lot of people who are responding to when I put out on Twitter that I think ESPN is kind of leaning towards the right direction here with Bryant. There's people who are like, yes, I agree 100%. I would only give him like 100 million-ish over 5 years. And then there's some people who are calling it absolutely insane to say that that is what Kris Bryant is going to get. So I think I already said this, but I would expect Bryant to do better than 5 years, 90 million, but maybe like 5 years, 110 million, something like that. I think that at that kind of price, it's going to bring a lot of teams who are like, you know, Kris Bryant probably is going to end up getting overpaid a little bit. But if he's close to signing a term of 5 years, 90 million, it's going to bring a lot of teams into that conversation, enough for me that it would drive up the price to at least have somebody overpay a little bit. And so that's kind of what I expect ultimately out of Bryant. But I also wouldn't be absolutely shocked if he ends up getting 8 years, 200 million, or 6 years, 160 million, whatever. Yeah, 160 is what MLB Trade Rumors projected. So anyway, coming up next, we're going to talk about Kevin Gausman. We're going to talk about DeSclafani and Wood, and also Brandon Belt. So you're not going to want to miss that conversation. But first, I want you to know I love Thanksgiving. All of the good food and treats and plenty of it. But maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so high in calories and sugar. That is absolutely true for me. I am a health conscious person, and so I tend to not indulge in these desserts. Some people call me crazy, but I tend to just avoid desserts. But what's so great about Built Bar is that they taste like a candy bar, but only have like 4 grams of sugar in a typical bar and just about 130 calories. So go for the raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie around Thanksgiving time. All bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're soft and easy to chew as well. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the other Giants free agents. Kevin Gausman also has a ton of variance to him. It's pretty wild. Normally, these sources kind of converge around a number, and it's not, you don't see that much variation, especially when you're talking about some of the top guys like Kris Bryant and Kevin Gausman. But that is not the case this year. And I think, as I said, that it makes it more interesting. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Now, I should say that MLB Trade Rumors ranks Bryant as their 4th best free agent in this year's class. ESPN has Bryant as 8th best, and FanGraphs has Kris Bryant as their, as I scroll here, he is 6th best. So there's some agreement, 6th, 8th, and 4th. I guess it's not, he's in the top 10 clearly, but I think, again, ESPN having him number 8 behind Max Scherzer, behind Kevin Gausman, who they have number 6. So MLB Trade Rumors has Gausman 5th. So there's some agreement there, but as we'll see with FanGraphs, FanGraphs is the low source on Kevin Gausman, and I think they're off on Bryant, I think, and I think they're way off on Kevin Gausman. But again, we'll start with MLB Trade Rumors, and they have Gausman at 6 years, $138 million. So the average annual value there is $23 million for Kevin Gausman. Now, ESPN comes in with a similar average annual value at $21 million, but over 5 years. So it comes out to 5 years, $105 million. And for me, I'll just get this out of the way. I think, again, that ESPN is the closest. But where this really goes off the rails here is, for me, on FanGraphs, they have Kevin Gausman getting 3 years, $54 million. That's an average of $18 million per year. So 18 million is not that different than these other average annual values at 23 and 21. But what's shocking is that it's only over 3 years. So usually when the term gets shorter, the average annual value goes up. So by far the lowest average annual value, and for only 3 years as opposed to 5 and 6 for the other sources. I just don't really understand that. I just think Kevin Gausman has more than earned a deal in excess of 3 years. And if a team only wants to go 3 years, they're going to have to pay a higher average annual value. I would say, like off the top of my head, at least 3 years, 75 million, going 25 million per year. At 3 years, 18 million, I think every team in baseball would just be all over that, which would drive up the price. So I have predicted basically 5 years, 110-ish million. So I think ESPN at 5 years, 105 is obviously what I would consider the closest. I also wouldn't be shocked by MLB Trade Rumors 6 years, 138 million. But again, the term is going up compared to ESPN, and the average annual value is going up. And normally it's the other way around. And like if you add on an extra year, you're going to shave off some average annual value. So maybe 6 years, 120 million instead of 138. I mean, that's a pretty big difference, but that's kind of where I see it, because there is some risk. He is just a 2-pitch pitcher, and there was inconsistent performance in the second half. So there's risk with both of the top 2 contracts here, but at 3 years, 54 million, you're basically paying really for the pessimistic view of Kevin Gausman. And I just think at least one team is not going to have a very pessimistic view of Kevin Gausman. And I would expect that the Giants, I've been predicting that he ends up back with the Giants, and something around 5 years, 100 million seems to be roughly correct. So anyway, moving on, we are going to find the next Giants player on these lists. And for me, it's Brandon Belt. Because, well, no, let's go with Anthony DeSclafani first. Brandon Belt will save for last because he's a bit of an interesting, different type of case because he received the qualifying offer. But Anthony DeSclafani and Alex Wood did not. And so let's talk about Anthony DeSclafani. MLB Trade Rumors is projecting 3 years, $42 million for Anthony DeSclafani. That's $14 million per year. ESPN has him at 3 years, $36 million. That's $12 million per year. And FanGraphs, once again, for me, a little bit off the rails, 2 years, $20 million. I just think that's a super pessimistic view about a guy who just went out there and had an ERA in the low 3s over a full season of work. 2 years, $20 million. I mean, that is what you pay for basically a below league average pitcher. And I think that that's a really pessimistic viewpoint. The other two, I think, kind of nail it. Around 3 years, around $40 million, roughly $12, $13, $14 million per year over 3 years sounds about right for me for Anthony DeSclafani. And I have talked repeatedly about how it's just a hunch. Obviously, he could be back. Farhan Zaidi has talked about a desire to bring back pretty much everybody from this year's team, and for good reason. I mean, they won 107 games, but DeSclafani was brought into the Giants on a 1-year, $6 million deal. So to go back out into the market and get around $40 million over 3 years, the Giants would have done their job again, which is they're bringing in pitchers when their value is down. and helping them be the best versions of themselves on a 1-year deal. They can kind of springboard back into the market and earn a lot more money. They've done that with Drew Pomeranz, Drew Smyly, Kevin Gausman, and then Anthony DeSclafani and Alex Wood are going to be next here. But for me, at 3 years, roughly $40 million, I just think the Giants would be fine moving on from DeSclafani and instead finding the next Anthony DeSclafani, because I think they have enough confidence and belief in themselves to be able to do that. And I just think Alex Wood represents a better bargain. And here is where a lot of people push back on me when I say that, the Giants should be looking for bargains and whatnot. It's not that I'm like always saying be cheap. I'm not like, ultimately I want them to spend as much money as possible. And I expect them to get at least up into the $150 million range for payroll. And they should be able to push $200 million and above, like the Dodgers, like the Padres. But the fact is, if you have limited resources, which every team does, and what I mean by that is they're not just going to spend $1 billion on 2022 payroll, right? They have a number, or at least roughly, call it 200 million, that they're able to spend. And so the point is, spend it wisely, because once you reach the limit, you're done. And we've seen how bloated contracts to players, like basically being paid much more than they're worth, can cause major problems. That's kind of what led the Giants into this downturn that they had been in before 2021. And so if you have $200 million dollars to spend, let's just say that's the number, then choose wisely how you spend it. And so that's where I say it's a better bargain, because you're getting maybe surplus value out of Alex Wood, and we'll talk about what that projected contract is in a minute. And then you can spend those savings on somebody else, and then you're getting excess production for what you're paying. So you're spending ultimately, I don't know, $150 million, and you're getting $300 million worth of value. That is how you win, right? You want to get the most value and production as you can for the money that you're spending. And so that's only what I mean. I am not suggesting that the Giants should spend less money overall. It's just about getting value on each and every contract. So anyway, the next guy is going to be Alex Wood, and I also want to talk about Brandon Belt as well. So we'll be back with that in a minute, but first, we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we're going to talk about Alex Wood and Brandon Belt as we look through these top 50 free agent lists for MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and FanGraphs. These are all highly reputable sources. Like I said, Kylie McDaniel at ESPN, MLB Trade Rumors, I think everybody at this point recognizes is a really good source for this. And then at FanGraphs, they have been doing this for a long time as well. Although this year, I just happen to think that a lot of the contracts, at least for the Giants, are not what I would call the most likely to transpire, but we'll see. That's what's fun about this. But as the week goes on, we're going to start looking at some other guys who might be targets for the Giants, what those projected contracts are, and what I think are good buys and what I think are not so good buys. And again, it has to do with planning out your roster, right? You just can't overpay for every single player, assuming there's a number that the ownership is not going to want to go over. And some people might say, well, they should just spend whatever it takes to field the best team possible. And perhaps that's true, but that's not really living in reality, I would say, because ownership tends to not want to just hemorrhage money all season long. I don't know. I just know that historically they haven't gone much past $200 million. So I'm kind of considering that to be roughly the limit. But they're always going to want to give themselves wiggle room as well. Say you make a midseason trade for Kris Bryant and you take on a bunch of payroll, which is what they did. So we'll see. Anyway, you get the idea. Moving on to Alex Wood, the projected contract for MLB Trade Rumors is 3 years, $30 million. Obviously, that is $10 million per year. For ESPN, it's 2 years, $22 million. Obviously, $11 million per year. And then FanGraphs, once again, they didn't even rank Alex Wood in their top 50. And some of the guys who come in at the back end of the top 50, there's just no way I would take them over Alex Wood. And also, we're talking about, I mean, my goodness, we're looking at Yusei Kikuchi. We're looking at Zach Greinke, who's fallen off. We're looking at Alex Cobb. I don't know. These actually, I should have scrolled even further. We're looking at Aaron Loop, Michael Pineda, Jonathan Villar, Yusei Kikuchi, as I said. Anyway, I mean, Yusei Kikuchi coming in at number 50 on their list, projected to earn 1 year, $8 million by FanGraphs. And this is Ben Clemens, who is predicting these contracts. Also on FanGraphs, if you want to take a look for yourself, they have crowdsourcing where readers were able to predict contracts, and they look at the median and the mean for those crowdsourced contracts. So that's also interesting. We just didn't really have time to get into all of that. It would be 5 different sources we're looking at here. But anyway, I think that's wrong to not even have Alex Wood ranked in the top 50 personally. And again, I think MLB Trade Rumors and ESPN are kind of right in line with roughly $10 million per year over 2, maybe 3 years, maybe 2 years plus a club option, something like that. And I just think I realized I was trying to say this earlier and didn't really make that point, but I think that that's a better buy than Anthony DeSclafani. I think the production might end up being similar, and part of the reason that Alex Wood comes at more of a discount is that he has a history of injuries more than Anthony DeSclafani does. And the thing, though, is that Anthony DeSclafani's peripherals were not as good as that low 3s ERA. And there's a lot kind of suggesting maybe production more at closer to an ERA of 4, whereas Alex Wood came in with an ERA roughly in the mid to high 3s, and the peripherals kind of backed that up. So peripheral numbers may be suggesting they're more similar than the ERAs would show. And we're talking like 2 years, $22 million maybe for Alex Wood versus 3 years, $40 million for Anthony DeSclafani. So a big kind of difference there. Maybe 3 years, $36 million. I don't know exactly what it'll be, but I just think Wood represents a better buy here. And that's why if I had to pick one of these two to come back, I think it makes a little more sense for Alex Wood. So moving on to Brandon Belt, he becomes, he's one of the more interesting cases here because he received the qualifying offer. MLB Trade Rumors predicts that he will accept the qualifying offer. ESPN predicts 2 years, $25 million. And FanGraphs predicts that Brandon Belt will accept the 1 year, $18.4 million qualifying offer. Now, I think that there's a chance that he accepts a qualifying offer, but I also think all of these sources are kind of underrating him. We have talked about how he was the third best offensive player in baseball over the last couple of seasons behind Mike Trout and Bryce Harper and ahead of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Fernando Tatis Jr. So pair that with the fact that Brandon Belt is a really good defensive first baseman as well. And I just think, yes, there's a chance he accepts the qualifying offer. It would have everything to do with him just wanting to be with the Giants and also him wanting to prove that he's healthy and then maybe re-enter the market next year. But he's going to be entering his age 35 season after 2022. And I just think now might be the time for Brandon Belt to just kind of cash in one last time, maximize the total amount that he would be receiving and just roll with that. And that would be what he would be looking for. I don't know this from firsthand knowledge, but I'm just kind of guessing based on his age, based on the fact that the performance was, I think, good enough, even though he dealt with injuries, to warrant a somewhat hefty deal. So I'm not sure any of these are really what I would expect ultimately. I think he could get a 3-year contract, maybe 2 years plus an option. And the ESPN prediction of 2 years, $25 million at a $12.5 million average annual value, I just don't see why he wouldn't. If that was the best he was going to get, I would expect him to take the qualifying offer, because it's not that much more than the qualifying offer total, but spread over 2 years as opposed to just the one. And so, yeah, I think that he could maybe get more like a 3-year, $40 million deal, or 2 years, $32 million like Brandon Crawford got, something along those lines. But 2 or 3 years, maybe. If it's going to be one, it would be the qualifying offer to me. But 2 or 3 years, $40 million, kind of my expectation for Brandon Belt. So anyway, coming up tomorrow, we're going to just continue to look at these lists. I think they're really fascinating, and we're going to be talking about potential targets for the Giants. Chris Taylor, Starling Marte. How about the top of the market? Correa, Seager, Scherzer, Verlander. What are the projected contracts for these players, and do I think they're fits for the San Francisco Giants? So I really hope you come back for that, and I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On Bets is your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Make Locked On Bets your second listen today. Anyway, once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Kaspick. That's Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it, leaving a review, liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube, all of that good stuff. So thank you in advance, and thank you so much to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.